Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Ryan Craig. I'm the owner and operator of QC's Building Services, and I'm a licensed building and timber pest consultant. The purpose of this video is to explain to people one of the key functions that is often recommended and carried out during a timber pest inspection for purchasers of residential properties, the reasons for this, the failings of it and the limitations of it, and just general information they should be aware of in relation to this matter, which is all about the recommendation for an invasive inspection quotes, to be done by purchasers over and above what is being done for them at the time they are purchasing the property with the timber pest inspection. Timber pest inspections are, during pre-purchase inspections for purchasers, are done to advise them of any timber pest activity and damage, conducive environments, so they can be given recommendations in terms of what they can do about it. They are only done in a visual and non-invasive nature at the time it is done for purchasers when they are purchasing property. There is no removing of materials. Because of that, there are significant limitations that an inspector can come across, resulting in areas they can't see, not through a fault of their own, but through the restrictions posed on them by the conditions of the inspection that is carried out. Such limitations that a consultant may come across and not be able to give purchasers are things like the extent of any termite activity, the extent of any termite damage at a property, because it could be concealed in wall cavities, beneath floor coverings, in insulation, beneath insulation with the ceiling void areas, or any visually inaccessible area the consultant can't access because of these limitations of a visual and non-invasive inspection being done. And also the costs associated and the recommendations that may be required for an issue that they may identify visually, but they can't quantify again because of the limitations they encounter. So some key points to think about for purchasers that you must, one of the biggest point that you must be aware of as a purchaser of a residential property when it comes to having the pest inspection done is the following. The reality is that the only way of determining any termite activity or damage at a property is not from having an inspection carried out. It's removing of all of the exterior linings, cladding, all of the interior linings, plasterboard, whatever linings may be there, removing all the insulation within the ceiling void and any other visual impediment that might be present at a property. In essence, stripping it bare and having all of the timber clearly exposed. Now, that's the only way that someone can concisely advise any person as to the level of damage at a residential property or termite activity or damage they may have caused. Now, clearly, that's not practical to do at this stage when someone's buying a property purchaser, because the vendor won't allow you to do that, and it's not really practical cost-wise and to achieve it. But it is the only way. The next best thing that a purchaser can do is organise a pest inspection, which is what most people do, but they must understand or should understand that that inspection is visual, non-invasive, and because of that, any inspection that is done for them, no matter how well it's done for them, will always have the risk of there being termite damage, termite activity, or concealed termite damage in areas at the property that the consultant, through no fault of their own, will not identify or report on because it's visually inaccessible to them because of the limitations of the inspection being visual and non-invasive. So I hope that sort of clarifies that aspect. So what is done by inspectors and consultants to try and overcome these limitations and to legally protect themselves because if they can't see these things is, first of all, when they carry out inspection, there should be clear advice about the limitations and the inaccessible areas to the purchaser so that they're fully aware of this and they can factor this in when they buy the decision as part of their due diligence. The other very important aspect that can be made is that, and that we're going to cover now in this video, is there's a recommendation at times for further and more invasive styles of inspecting to be done. Now, basically, what that means is that, or when it's recommended, can be, say if there's termite activity identified or termite indicators identified or any sort of risk or moisture meter findings identified, that the consultant can't further action or investigate because it's visual and non-invasive only, but they feel it warrants further investigation and more so invasive inspections, which is the removal of materials and linings or any other impediment to give visual and clear unimpeded access to that area. So that's when they're recommended by a consultant in the report, when they feel that there is further investigation that may be of benefit, and that involves the invasive inspection techniques they are recommending, and that's in essence to remove linings or any other material to give clear unimpeded visual access to an area. Like plasterboard linings behind a shower, let's say, that's got moisture readers leaking. So all the consultant may see is the moisture meter reading on the plasterboard linings, but to determine what's happening inside that wall cavity, those linings need to come off, and that's when an invasive inspection needs to be done. Why are they made? Because visual access of the inspection by the consultant won't give them all the access they need to see everything to diagnose the problem, and the invasive inspection will give that access and provide unimpeded access, which can only be achieved through removing those materials, and only complete visual unimpeded access to any issue or defect, timber pest matter being raised by an inspector, can enable them to concisely identify exactly what's going on and give concise details and good details to the purchaser so they can make a more informed decision. Another main factor as to why invasive inspections are constantly recommended by inspection companies in the report is because they provide legal protection for the inspection company. I'll give you an example from potential litigation in the future. I'll give you an example. Let's say if I did an inspection for someone and I've identified that there was some termite indicators in an area adjacent to a shower, and basically it was in a skirting board, and that's all that could be visually seen. In the report I provided to the clients, I said that there was termite indicators in that skirting board, and basically that was it. I didn't recommend an invasive inspection. Let's say hypothetically I did that. Now, what that would do is greatly expose me in the future for my client if they purchase the property and they moved in, and at some stage in the future, if they're carrying out renovations and rectifying things, and they do remove linings in that area where the termite damage was found in the skirting board, and then find other damage in the concealed areas in, say, wall cavities, studs, and those kind of things, I would be legally liable based on legal precedent and would lose for a claim to be made on me by my client, and they could say that I had a duty of care and I failed on my duty of care to recommend to them that at the time I found the termite indicators in the skirting board, at that time I should have recommended that further and more invasive inspections be done so that they could identify it then and negotiate with the purchaser, and if they had have done that at the time, they wouldn't have had to incur any additional costs, even though they knew that there was that risk because I identified that there was termite damage there. This has all been identified by the courts, and this is why there's a recommendation for invasive inspections to be put into the reports by insurance companies in all cases like this, and to be done at the time so that consultants can't be litigated on down the track. So that's another reason why invasive inspections are done. Now, limitations and difficulties with invasive inspections for termite inspections. Legal consent must be given by the vendor to remove any material, and that's often difficult to achieve because most vendors don't want to do that because they know by giving consent it could identify, first of all, it damages the property in some area, and it also magnifies and amplifies and defines exactly if there's more damage in the area that can't currently be seen. So vendors don't want them for that reason. Invasive inspections can be very beneficial for a localized area like a bathroom shower, because you can diagnose the area directly adjacent to the walls and remove those cavities. There's no other risk in any other area of the property of there being a problem, because we know with the bathroom shower it's directly in that area. But it is extremely limited in relation when it comes to termite inspections, because they can be misleading and misunderstood by people, and if they aren't interpreted and thoroughly understood for what they are, a conclusion can be made by purchasers which is completely false and incorrect and can be deadly. I'll give you an example on how it can be misleading for a termite inspection. So really good invasive inspections for localized areas, but let's just say we found some termite damage in a skirting board, and we're thinking about invasive inspection for that area. Now, the consultant has to recommend that be done, of course. We know the reasons why, because it legally protects them, and there can be a benefit for it to be done. But if that invasive inspection is done and the skirting board and the plasterboard removed just in that area where the termite damage is found, that only defines what is going on in that particular area. Now, it's not with termite damage, it's not like a bathroom shower and there's no risk of there being in other areas. With termite activity and damage, it can be in the other wall cavity and the other lining in the garage, despite the fact the skirting board isn't damaged. It can be down the end of the structure, completely away from where the skirting board is damaged. So if you conclude that the findings of a localized invasive inspection in relation to termite activity are relative to the entire structure, that can be fatalistic. It's extremely flawed in its logic. The only way to determine, as I said before at the start of this video, the exact level of termite damage and activity at a property is to completely remove all the linings and cladding and insulation and any other visual impediment that is restricting access to the framing timbers. That's the only way you can determine the full extent of damage at a property, and that's the only thing that should be in purchaser's head. despite the value of an invasive inspection being done in some areas. It should not be conclusive, and you should not rush to the judgment that, hey, because it was done there in the garage where the skirting board was affected and nothing was found, then nothing is going to be in other areas of property. That's completely wrong, as long as you understand that. So they can be a benefit, but understand for timber pest matters, they can be, if they're misread, really badly fatalistic, and you can come to the wrong conclusion. So, summary. It is, as a summary for this video, it is legally incumbent on an inspector to recommend invasive inspections because it gives them protection from future litigation based on court decisions and legal precedents. Invasive inspections do have real good benefits in some key areas, particularly for building issues, but when it comes to termite inspections and invasive inspections for timber pest matters, you've got to understand that they can be misleading, and then they can be misunderstood in terms of their value, and they're extremely limited because they'll only tell you about the localized area you do an invasive inspection for, whereas termites can have accessed any other area of the property. So understand that they have limitations. Again, I repeat, it keeps coming back to that thing that, remember, the only way to determine the full extent of damage is by removing all of the linings, and that is the defined way it can only be known, which is impractical to achieve, but you've got to apply that as in your part of your rationale when you come to any understanding of an invasive inspection and the benefits of them being done. So I hope this is of some informative value for you, and I hope you enjoyed watching the video. Thank you for watching.